Hello friends, welcome to PlutoCon 2021. First of all, I want to thank everyone who is watching this presentation. I'm thankful to you for your interest and taking time to watch this. And I'm especially thankful to PlutoCon organization for giving me an opportunity to talk about the ERP analytics work I've been doing. Now, this presentation is actually meant for ERP consultant, ID developers, finance, supply chain, HR managers, or anyone curious to implement data science concept in ERP space. My name is Amit Shukla, and in past 20 years of my professional career as an IT and business intelligence consultant, I have done several ERP implementation like Oracle, PeopleSoft, SAP, Workday, mostly for very, very large organizations. I've implemented general ledger, accounts payable, receivable, or a lot of different modules like CRM and CM. Whatever you can think of is necessary to run any business organization efficiently from a finance and supply chain perspective. Now, in this talk, I will discuss and hopefully show you some few examples, analytic reports about how and why I'm using Pluto for finance and supply chain analytics for big ERP. I'm going to cover this topic. Now, if time permits, I'll be happy to answer any follow-up questions you may have. As you can see on my screen, that this notebook is hosted on one of the PlutoCon servers. However, just in case, if you have any follow-up questions or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Now, let's get started. ERP systems manage different aspects of business operations. So for example, human capital management, HCM, manages employee and payroll informations. You have CRM, which manages customer relationship management. For finance and supply chain perspective, as you can see on my screen, a typical ERP system, general ledger, is the core module of the finance and supply chain systems. Then you have other business processes surrounding the GL. So for example, buy to pay, order to cash, procure to pay. Those are the different operations that deal with the different business functionalities in an organization. Now, many organizations use ERPs in different ways, and they may choose to implement all of these or maybe only few of this systems. So for example, you only implement accounts payable, receivables, procurement, and receipt, specifically if you are dealing only with the buy to pay systems. You also can choose to implement assets or maybe order to cash or lease management, things like that. It totally depends on the business organization. Now, in any typical ERP system, I'm going to share some process diagram. Like for example, your GL may look like this. You have a lot of different subdomains like accounts payable, receivable, expense, grants, a lot of entries. You do the actual transaction into those business subdomains, and then you create the general line entries and you post it to the ledger. So depending on your organization structure, this diagram may look very, very different. This is just an example. All right, so same thing. Let me share some other examples with you. So for example, accounts payable may have different functionalities where you receive the vendor invoice, you choose to pay them, and there are a lot of different functionalities depending on your business. So for example, you look for duplicate invoices, tax assessment, you calculate your discount, and then you eventually end up paying to the vendor. So it totally depends on the your organization, what are the modules you have implemented, and within modules you can choose to implement only particular sections, or that means depending on the business process. Also, let me share one more diagram for you. This is an ERD diagram, that means entity relationship diagram. Most of the ERP systems, they use structured databases, like for example, Oracle or many RDBMS like data structure, because the data is highly structured in format of tables. So as you can see, again, this is again very typical example. Depending on your business process, your organization, it may look very, very different. But just in a nutshell, so for example, you have accounting line, those flows to the journal, and eventually you get posted to the ledger. So journal ledger, it sits at the core of your business organization. Okay. Now let's talk about the current solutions. What is available in the market. So ERPs are backbone to any living organization, whether it's small, medium, or large. Every organization use ERP concept, whether in a piece of paper, a small Excel file, Microsoft Access database, or maybe a large sophisticated system like SAP, Oracle, PeopleSoft, Coupa, Workday, things like that. There are tons of organizations, big ERP systems available in the market. Now, the small, there are a lot of new apps like QuickBooks, NetSuite, and Tally. The popularity of these softwares among medium and small organizations are proof that ERPs are the way to manage any business successfully. Now, ERP items, people don't see those as a luxury items anymore. In past, last 2 decades, like people used to think only big organizations, ERPs are meant for only big organizations. That's not true anymore. Even the small vendors nowadays, they just scan the invoices and they want to pay to their vendor, even to the customer, or maybe, services, whatever they are procuring, they want to pay it online using their mobile devices. So, and those are eventually, in a way, those are all ERP systems. So almost every organization, whether it's small, medium, or large, is using ERPs in one way or another. Now, big organizations just happen to use like big systems because they have millions and billions of transactions happening every day. So that's the reason, they prefer to use SAP and Oracle or PeopleSoft like systems to manage their operations. Now, what is the problem with the system? So any ERP systems are very, very good when it comes to the capturing the data. And there are three aspects for any data: read, write, and understand. So while ERP systems, they are very, very good in writing the data. That means they have built a very good quality transaction system which can capture any record, almost on any devices. So for example, you go to Walmart or any other Target or any other store, and they have all the registers which can capture all your transactions. So writing part is very, very good. Now, these ERP systems, I would say, they have mastered the right aspect of ERP. However, when it comes to the read and understand data, why did you write the data at the first place? So that you can read the data and you can understand it. Understanding means you can create meaningful analytics on your ERP system. So, and also these traditional ERP systems, they have built a lot of good quality reporting tools. So for example, Microsoft Power BI or Tableau or Oracle Analytics, Microsoft Excel, there are tons of business intelligence tools available in the market. So now why all of a sudden, I choose Pluto for this reason. So that's I'm going to share my experience why I think Pluto is the next generation enterprise reporting tool. Even for the enterprise reporting or even for the small, medium, or whatever ERP systems you are using, I feel like, Pluto, because it helped me. I just want to share my experience, how Pluto helped me and how I think why it's an enterprise level reporting tool. So let's look at a couple of the financial report. So I'm going to show you one typical example. So if you just Google it, you will find it, how the Apple balance sheet or many Google or Apple or any other company's organization balance sheet look like. So actually just a collection of all the dollar amounts by the account. So as you can see on the left hand side, you will see the net sales or operating expenses, a lot of all this financial statement. They just give you, they represent like how one organization did in one quarter or maybe year till date or maybe, in past year, things like that. So this is a typical financial report look like. Now, any financial statement, there are three different parts, like a cash flow statement or maybe income statement or balance sheet. I'm not going to cover those details here. This presentation is about Pluto and how I'm using Pluto for the finance and supply chain. So maybe that's not the appropriate topic for this discussion. But let's look at the financial statement. Now, to produce that, suppose I'm working for a big organization. What do I need? So I need to have an account hierarchy. So, for example, in this case, as you can see, I have created all of this. So just one more thing I want to word of caution here. Whatever data I'm going to share is just it's a random data. It has no resemblance with any organization. So everything is fake data. But the same concepts can be applied to the real data. Okay. All right. So for the account dimensions, typically first thing, any account, any organization has their own chart of accounts. So for example, you choose to say, okay, you set up different accounts and to cover their to record your operating expenses, non-operating expenses, assets, liability, net worth, etc. So in this example, as you can see, I have created 5 accounts each per classification. So there are 35 total accounts and there are 7 fields. Again, it may look very, very different. In a typical organization, you have at least in my organization, you have 10,000 accounts and maybe more than that. People have 100,000 different account systems to capture their business operation. So just pretend that your account dimension looks like this. You have set up accounts which are classified under each of this classification. So for example, your operating expenses, which covers your which records your travel transaction, employee payroll or non-operating, and your assets, liability, things like that. Similarly, any organization, you may have a your own department dimension. So for example, you have different departments, and within department you can have sub departments. So again, just for the sake of example, I have taken 5 different department here. So for example, pretend in your organization you have sales department, HR, IT staff, business, and location, others department, where so for all the temp staff or your contractual employees, just consider them like other department or whatever. Like, again, this is another example. So in a typical organization, in my opinion, you have 100,000 or 5,000 different department. So now let's go to the location part. So same thing like account and dimension. Pretend that you have different locations. So again, depending on your organization, you can have, even in my, some of the organization I have seen within the building, you have different floors. So each floor, if your, if your one floor is dealing with accounts payable, other is receivables, and last to your basement, you do the receiving from the actual vendor, you may have, you may choose to implement 3 different locations within the same building. Totally depend on your business requirement. But let's pretend that I have created like 12 different cities based location. So just an example, you have an accounts dimension here, department dimension here, location department here. Now what does this is again a visual, just showing you that I have 5 accounts each for this classification. Same thing, 5 departments for this, and 5 location per region. All right, so what is a ledger? So financial ledger, a typical ledger looks like this. So you have actual ledger. So actual means what is the actual expenses I'm bearing, and maybe there's something budget part, and people also have the forecast ledger. I'll come back to that later in a minute. But for just pretend that you have actuals ledger, and in say fiscal year 2021, accounting period 1, January to December, you have 1 to 12 accounting periods. For this organization ID, for this location, for this department, you have say $9.5 million booked expenses in one particular accounting period. So this is your typical accounting. It's not actually an accounting entry. It's just the summarized information. Your summarized ledger may look like this. And in real organization, the first thing you will notice, any medium-sized organization, I can guarantee it has more than 5 or 10 million rows. So that's the reason I'm not going to compare Pluto with other tools. The first thing when I started, when we do the analytics, we build analytical report in different tools, even Microsoft Excel or Power BI and Tableau. I'm not going to compare Oracle Analytics. I'm not going to compare Pluto with them, but I'm just going to talk about here. What I'm doing here, we have to deal with at least 30 to 40 million rows, just to create one simple report. So one thing I must admire, Julia is known for I need a system, I need a programming language which is built to which can handle big data. So to create this kind of reports, I know people talk about Julia, they say it solves the 2-language problem. But in ERP space, I already have 4 to 5 language problems. In ERP, people use ETLs to build, to move the data, and then, they use a Scala or Java to massage the data, and then we have Python, then we have a lot of different programming languages. So we already have 4 or 5 different programming languages we use in ERP. So then I started experimenting last year with this Pluto, and I will with Julia. So I said, what, why not use Julia? And again, when you're using language like Julia, you don't have to depend on your IT department. You can just focus on running your business operations and creating your analytics. You just have to learn one language. So Julia solved that one language problem for me, and then Pluto solved that business intelligence tooling problem for me. So what the point is, I am going to, so I have 2.8 million rows, just in a typical, for 2020 for one fiscal year. In a typically, actually, I deal with 30 to 40 million, maybe sometime 1 billion rows, just for the 1 year ledger data. And this is just the ledger, which is the summary. And when you go to the accounting line details, it's we always, I can give you example. We have 500 million rows, something like it. So that's the amount of the data we deal with. Now, when I started so I started experimenting with Julia, and then I got into Pluto, and then I said, okay, let me create ledger with this. So as you can see, very simply in few seconds, I was able to plot my ledger with 2.8 million rows here. And I did it actually with 28 million, and it was 10 seconds and it was done. So now then I said, okay, let me try to create a GL balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow. So as I was showing you that example before, that sample financial statement. So what is actually a balance sheet? So balance sheet is just like, the dollar amount depending on your summarized dollar information per your account classification. And same thing goes with income statement, cash flow. It's just like, you move these are the different views of your balance sheet. You want to see your dollar amount based on your department, or maybe based on your accounts, or based on your location. So these three statements actually, all the financial statements, they just roam around all the GL data. So once you have your GL data in place, and definitely I would, I did a lot of data massaging, and I was able to do it very, very quickly here. As you can see, I was able to, create this kind of report. So as you can see, this is a very, very dynamic report. One thing I'm going to, share my experience. Once you show this kind of a statement to your leadership, first thing they will tell, oh, what if, this looks very cool, but can you, I want to see 2021. I want to see accounting period 2. So all of these, executive leaders, they have, very dynamic, they want the dynamic information. They want the plotting to be right there. So for example, I want to see what the budgets look like. So you can easily switch to the budgets, simple prompts, and simple moving from fiscal year or accounting period. So as you can see, I want to see what are my budgets planned for region A, and I want to see for accounting period 2. So you can see it gives them flexibility to see the data dynamically. Okay. Again, I'm not going to compare with other tools. Other tools give this information as well. Now, what's so special about Julia here? Julia is the reactive. Julia. Keep on saying Julia language and Pluto. Pluto is the reactive observable kind of interface. So, for example, I change it at one place, and it immediately updates the balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow all together using one prompt. So that's I like the reactive. Data updates depending on this. One thing I want to show you, other thought, is the ledger visual. So again, just to plot that kind of amount of data. So for example, I'm plotting 28 million data points in one graph. Okay, and then you want to compare this with another 28. So for example, I want to see my actual versus budget. So budget may be less rows. But again, the point is, again, is a bad example. Please pardon me, because it's showing that in quarter 2 I almost lost. I budgeted for this, but my actuals are like around 40 million. It doesn't even make sense. But the point is there's the view, there's the point of view organization, leisure, finance, and supply chain people wants to see in a tool. So definitely Pluto, what Pluto does, it gives you simple prompts and simple filters, and plotting that information live. It just definitely helps a lot to make helps the leaders and everybody, the people who are managing finance and supply chain operations, to manage their data and to see that the analytics live and reactive way. It helps them a lot. So let me show you another example here. Okay, this is a 3D visual. Again, it's a bad looking plot, but the point is you can always see how your operating expenses. You can compare your operating expenses to prior year operating expenses. Okay, so you want to see how your net worth looks like, and when you have these many liabilities out there. So why you have too much liabilities and your assets are less. So things like that. It gives a 3D visual. So as an executive leader, I want to see, okay, how my actual compares for one region to another region. So Pluto definitely it shines here. None of the tools I've been using gives me this much flexibility and this visual where I can manipulate the data live and I can compare one data with another data set, and especially when I'm dealing with such a huge data set. Let me show you another example here. This is the same example, but from the different perspective. Here, I'm just I'm comparing my balance sheet account and income statement or cash flow accounts, and I want to see how I did it, for 2020 and by region. And here, I'm just doing it by department. So this is a different visual. The point is there are two, again, this is a Pluto notebook, and I can be as creative as I want. So the good thing is I can share this with my organization leader, so that they can just see the visual. They can they want to compare one region to another, and they can take the business critical decisions almost immediately. Okay. Now there are a couple of things I want to talk about. What if, could have, should have, would have. So things like that. These are few examples. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, I won't be able to show each of these examples. But the point is, so for example, when your executive leaders or anybody, your organizations, CEO or CFO, they are looking at this data, first thing, their reaction will be, what if I merge this HR department to the, something IT. I take like 20% of resources here, I give it to IT, or maybe 20% of the IT, and let me move them to business or maybe sales department. How are my chart is going to look like? So they love to see this kind of movement, and without even changing the data. So ledger is something, is a Bible. You don't change it. Once you record something in a financial ledger, it just stays there forever. But always organization leaders, they want to see the future perspective. They want to see, okay, what if I would have so for example, I will give you the whole reason I created this report. I'm going to share my experience. Last year, due to the pandemic, almost all the organizations, they are allowing their employee to work from home. But assuming in quarter 2 or quarter 3 this year, this pandemic ends, okay, then what if the employee, they resume their work from office? So how much my travel amount is percentage will increase? So this is one of the questions my leadership asked, and it took me almost 3 or 4 days to create these reports using traditional business intelligence tools. While using Pluto, I can just do it. That was the reason I started experimenting with Pluto, and I came up with this idea. Another example is, so what would the reason cash flow investment? So for example, I want to see my ROI. If I would have invested 7% on one particular product or maybe another product. What if I have received some government funding? This pandemic during this pandemic. Okay. What if I have increased my IT operating expenses by 5%? So could I have reduced the HR staff, temp staff? And if I could have, what is the percentage my balance sheet is allowing me to reduce it by? So there are a lot of different, the moment you see these kind of numbers from the finance supply chain perspective, these are the questions comes in your mind. So definitely Pluto and Julia language helps answering these questions very, very efficiently. Okay. There are other things, again, I have done very cool operating and non-operating expense for the year. How do you predict that? It's simple, because ledger data is mostly time-based. So time series is a very good model. So we created a lot of time series and states model. Once you have those model, and then you plot those, that's what I was referring to when I was talking about forecast ledger. So you have actuals ledger, budget ledger, and you have forecast ledger. So all the forecasting data, what we are doing, those were coming from the time series model. At last, I want to show you one very cool dashboard. This is a static dashboard, but I can share the code. I can update the Pluto repository later on. Now in this dashboard, what we created last year, so we had a lot of inventory crisis. As you remember, in last pandemic, people were buying cleaning supplies and scrub and sanitizer like crazy people. Everybody was storing rice and toilet paper for some reason. So that time there were a lot of crises happened. So if you recall, in the month of March 2020, so we had a shortage in our inventory as well. So we wanted to create a system where we can live monitor all of these cleaning supplies, and also we had to implement one more purchase recommendation engine. So for example, a lot of people who bought sanitizer also bought cleaning supplies. They also bought waste paper. They also bought bandages. Same thing, the people who bought rice, they also bought bread, this kind of a thing. So this kind of live dashboard what we created, and definitely this was the life-saving thing that we did in our Pluto environment. The reason is we also implemented using the online state. So people wanted to see, my organization wanted to see a live inventory dashboard, so that what are the purchase order we have created, how many we have received, and how many we have returned to the vendor, what is the paid status, how much we have paid, and if though we have paid to the vendor, how much discount we earn, things like that. So this is one of the very cool dashboard what we created in Pluto. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show that live because that data set was very, very huge. But again, the Pluto, definitely, that's why I keep on using the word saying enterprise reporting tool system. We have a lot of different systems which we use for this kind of enterprise-based reporting to manage our live inventory. And I definitely see the Pluto being one of them, and I'm going to keep on using in near future as well. So at last, before I end this presentation, I just have some feature request. I wanted to again for example, I had this Pluto notebook. I just wanted to deploy it on a server. So I think this already I am hosting this on one of those. The technology is there. Is just like we need to just make use of it. And also the other features I wanted to I was hoping for that if you can create some kind of if you can create some kind of say linkage to the traditional BI tool. So for example, in Microsoft Power BI or Tableau, you can use R and Python inside that. So I was hoping it can be built some kind of a link there. But again, this is the wish list. I hope to if the Pluto organizations can deliver this kind of tool, this definitely is going to help a lot to overall finance and supply chain people who are using Julia for this purpose. Again, once again, thank you very much for listening to this for this presentation. In case if you have any question or anything, please feel free to reach out to me. Okay, thank you very much. Hey guys.
Hi Amit.
Hi, thank you very much. Very interesting talk.
Oh, thank you.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, it was like, very finance and ERP oriented. So I wasn't sure that you guys will like it because, this is mostly is for the people who understand and deal with ERP systems.
I found a lot of insight in your talk. Sorry, Benjamin, go.
Yeah, just one question now, actually I have several, but I start with one. How are you importing your data from the sources? Are you doing file import CSV or direct database connections or APIs or?
Okay, so be ready for a long answer. So I have shared my GitHub repository, everything. I have used csv.gl, xls.gl, ODBC, Hive, even the picture. So for example, employee, they have the receipts, like, a meal receipt. So scan the picture and upload it. So all of the data sources we use, like whatever you can think of, go to that repository, you will see we have built ETLs to move the data, but we are using Julia to move all kind of data.
Cool. Wow.
So,
okay.
Amit, what cool feature would you like to have for the report building?
So
you mentioned
as you know, I don't know how much you followed this whole presentation. It's all about ERP. I deal with ERP. That's what my background. All these ERP consultant analysts, like, they have thousands of analysts. They love Excel, Microsoft Excel, Power BI, Tableau, so that they can drag and drop, So when I see Python and R there, it's just like, it breaks my heart. I want to have a little icon there which says Julia or maybe Pluto. So if you can build an integration to those tools, definitely that will help. Yeah. And, try to build some. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. Maybe Connor's API is a way to do that technically.
Absolutely, yeah. And more than that, actually, earlier I was watching a talk, like, how you have some Pluto notebook, but you are accessing your Pluto notebook for live prediction, right? And you can show this to inside Microsoft Power BI or Excel. It's going to be awesome. So you have technology is there. Sorry, when I wrote this, I didn't know about this, but now, like, I'm learning more how you guys are building stuff. So definitely, I'm going to make use of that. Another feature is, like, people love drill down, drill through. Click here, it goes there. Those kind of things, that gives a lot of interactivity. That's what I would look for.
Okay, cool.
That means it's already used. It's not a proof of concept, already used in production for you, right?
Well, since last year, I've been using in during pandemic. When I'll share my experience, and I saw my balance sheet. Last year it was like this, and like this. A lot of random data. So we didn't even have time to like, we just need a tool and feed real data. There's no time for development, UAT and QA and production. We just use it. That's a good thing about it. Like, so, but hopefully, next year I'll share some, I work for a lot of, like, big organizations, healthcare organizations with Oracle and people's after, those kind of things. So hopefully, we are working with them, and next year when we have more budget, we have more IT, investment, we can build something and go to the production. But it is getting used with the real data out, considered as production.
Cool. Thank you.
Today about dashes,
Very
brackets,
nice.
and stars, the pain points and potential.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And I think we're going to move on to our next talk about dashes, brackets, and stars.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Amit.
Thank you very much.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.